All right, Crim 4, let's knock out Chapter 10 that is going to talk about juries. So you all probably know what a jury is. And we talked early on in the semester about a grand jury. And ultimately what we talked about was that the purpose of a grand jury was the same thing as the purpose of a preliminary hearing, and that was to decide if there was enough evidence to go forward with a trial. So this chapter, we are talking about a completely different type of a jury. This is the type of jury that you or I would sit on, typically. The notice that we get in the mail, and where you are summoned to go down to the courthouse and sit on a jury to decide whether someone is guilty or not guilty. So that's a different type of jury, and for purposes of this particular jury, they would call it a petite jury, but we would just call it a jury. So typically, this is the jury that we're talking about that decides whether or not someone is innocent or guilty. So this is one of our rights, as is listed in the Constitution of the United States. Sixth Amendment requires that we have the right to be tried by a jury of our peers. It gets kind of complicated, and we're going to talk more about that throughout this chapter. But we do have a right to be judged by a jury of our peers. We talked a little bit earlier on about venue versus jurisdiction as well. So when you are being judged by a jury of your peers, typically the jury is going to be a group of people that come from the same community that you live in. So if you have committed a crime in Fresno County, generally speaking, the jury is going to be a group of people from Fresno County. So you're going to be judged by a group of people, typically 12 people, that also live in Fresno County. I'm assuming that kind of makes sense. However, if you were to file for a change of venue, that could mean that you would go to another county. And we talked about this before, but I'm going to go over it kind of one more time. There was a case, and I'm going to use an example to make it, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. There was a case here in Fresno County where two sheriff's deputies, they were actually correctional officers working at the Fresno County Jail, were shot by a subject here in Fresno County. There were lots of news media reports. One of those deputies was gravely injured. He was shot in the head, and he was a very well-known deputy throughout the community, not only for his work as a correctional officer. He was also a football coach. He played football at Fresno State. He has I think 6 children. A lot of them are super active in sports, very active in their church, and very active in the Polynesian community in the city of Fresno, in the Fresno area. So a lot of people knew him, know his family, all that kind of stuff. So it was a pretty big deal in the news. So the issue there is, would the suspect who shot that correctional officer, get a fair trial in Fresno based on the fact that there was so much news media reports? Would he be able to find a jury of 12 people who hadn't heard about the case or already had some pretty maybe some biases already in that case? So if he had gotten a change of venue or got a judge to move that case to another area because of the large amounts of news reports, he would have gotten a change of venue, and the people that judged him would not have been from the same community. That did not happen in his particular case, but that's probably one of those few times when you would not be judged by people from your own community. So, but that's typically, if you are on a jury, you are judging someone from the same community where you reside. The only jury qualification set forth in the Sixth Amendment is that the jury be impartial and chosen from the district where the crime was committed. Trial by one's peers. And this is tricky, and we're going to talk again more about it, in a cross-section of the community. So, does that mean, we're going to go back to this one. Imagine me. We're going to use me as an example. I am a 40-something former probation officer, white, female, soccer mom, college professor. Okay? Does that mean that I have a right to be judged by a group of 12 former probation officer, white, female, 40-something-year-old, soccer mom, college professors? How long do you think it would take to find that mixture? I actually have kind of a weird mixture. White soccer mom and former probation officer, those are two things right there that don't really go together. So anyways, no, I don't have a right to have that. No, I have a right to have a cross-section of the community that I live in. So I have a right to have people who look like my community judge me. My jury has to look like my community. Now, if my community looks like, and let's just say the county of Fresno. Oh, good God. My phone always rings like the second I start recording these. And I'm just going to ignore it because it's somebody probably trying to sell me solar. But anyways, the community of Fresno, and I'm throwing some numbers here out. I don't know what the breakdown of the community of the county of Fresno is, but let's say it's 52% male and 48% female, and let's say it's 56% Hispanic. Let's say it's 37% white, and I'm making numbers up, so now they're not going to add up either. And let's say 10% Asian and 8% African American. Again, I'm making all those numbers up. But that's what I would expect my jury to look like. They don't have to look all like me specifically. They have to look like my community. So when people go to court and they expect that the entire jury is going to look exactly like them, that's not exactly what they have a right to. They have a right to have a jury that looks like their community, not necessarily like them. Okay? That might be a quiz question. Hopefully somebody's going to actually watch this video. I know, hint, hint. I'm going to start nagging you guys, so get ready. And I think Benjamin, thank you for watching these videos. It made my day that you actually commented on it. So anyways, okay. That's how easy it is to please me. I'm just saying. Okay, the procedure of jury selection varies from state to state. In the jury panel, there's generally no guidelines set forth for selection. You all have probably, well, no, actually you guys are pretty young, so a lot of you probably have never received the whole jury duty notice before. I know exactly what it looks like. I can spot it before I even touch it in the mailbox because it's horrifying to me. I don't want to get the jury duty notice. And typically it's not because I hate sitting in a courtroom so much, it's just the hassle of actually getting there. But let's talk some more about it. So what are some minimum qualifications for a person to be on a jury? You must be a citizen of the United States. You must be at least 18. You must live in that district for a certain period of time, usually a year. And by that district, I mean like Fresno County. If you live in Fresno County, you have to have lived there for at least a year, typically. You also must be of, and I love this, ordinary intelligence. What the heck does that mean? So, and I also love this because think about this. Think about the people you know in general. Just in general. Don't think about students that you go to school with, or what, just the people you know in general. Are the people that you know people you want to decide your fate? I know. Think about that. There's a lot of really smart people in this world, and there's a lot of really not that smart people in this world. Interesting, huh? Okay. There are some exemptions. What are they? Okay. Let me go back. A lot of people will go into jury duty and say things like, "I'm racist. I hate Mexicans, so don't put me on that jury." Don't do that, because the judges have heard that before. It's not true. Everybody knows you're just saying that. And guess what? That will follow you. There will be notes taken. There will be, and if I hate all women, so don't put me on a jury for women. Judges have seen the games before, so please don't do that. Just do the right thing and do your jury duty. But sometimes there will be exceptions. Police officers, they are a certain type of peace officer that is exempt from jury duty. I learned after being a probation officer that probation officers are not that type of peace officer, because I did get picked on a jury, and I was hoping that I was the right kind of peace officer to not get picked on a jury, and what do you know? That was not the case. I did get picked on a jury, and I'll give you my experience with that at the end of this PowerPoint lecture. But there are other exceptions. If you are the sole provider in a family and you own your own business, things like that, there are times when the judge, if you're a student, full-time student, a lot of times they'll give you they'll give you an extension and let you come back during the summer or winter break or things like that. So there are some exemptions. If you're blind or deaf, typically they're probably going to say, you are exempt. If you don't speak English, granted, could they bring in an interpreter? Yeah, but they're probably not going to. So there are, don't fake like you don't speak English, because people do that too. It's not the judge's first day. Okay, guys? All right. Don't toss your jury duty summons. I had a student a couple years ago who was sent a warrant. There was a warrant for his arrest because he failed to appear for jury duty. No joke. He was going to jail because he didn't go to jury duty. It was in Madera County, but either way, I'd never seen that before. I was very surprised, but it did happen. So anyways, okay. There are, attorneys do have the opportunity to challenge or request that people be removed from a jury. Let's say, and they will ask you a lot of questions while you're sitting in the jury box. If you had been the victim of a rape or something, maybe, and this is a rape case, they're very likely to excuse you or ask you to leave that jury panel because they don't want a rape victim to be a juror for a rape case, obviously. There are a lot of reasons why they might not want to have certain types of jurors for certain types of cases. They can challenge the jurors if they believe the jurors are biased for one reason or the other. And I'm gonna explain my experience at the end here. But they also, interestingly, they have to. Death penalty cases are also really interesting for juries. If there is a death penalty case or a case where there is a possibility that the outcome of the case could result in the death penalty, the jury has to be death qualified. So what that means is every juror who is chosen for that case has to be able to say that they would at least consider the death penalty as a possible consequence. So if you are one of those people, and there's nothing wrong with this, so I'm no judgment. If you're one of those people who just doesn't believe in the death penalty, you would not be on one of those juries. So it has to be a death qualified jury for death penalty cases. Another interesting thing, almost all cases for juries, the jury is only responsible for deciding if a person is guilty or not guilty. However, in death penalty cases, the jury also decides if the defendant lives or dies. That is really interesting. And I'm hoping, again, that you're listening to this. That could be a really good question for a quiz. Let's go. Okay. Attorneys are each given a certain number of challenges where they can basically disqualify certain jurors. They can't just get rid of a juror because they're male or female or Catholic or white or black or whatever. They have to have a reason other than their race, gender, religious beliefs, sexuality, things like that. Most long-term cases are going to have an alternate juror or two. Think O.J. Simpson. I mean, I think his case lasted for months. Imagine this case, just imagine this happens. The case is in its third month and one of the jurors gets hit by a bus. This didn't happen, but just imagine it did happen. And there's no alternate juror. They have to start the trial all over again. Okay, so what they do is they usually have 2 backups, 2, 3, 4 backups, just in case something crazy happens. A juror gets sick and dies. A juror gets caught watching the news coverage and they get kicked off the jury. Something crazy happens. So alternate jurors, typically in those really serious long-term cases, they're going to have a backup. And that juror will sit through the whole case, the whole trial, just like all the other jurors. They may never be needed and they may have to step in for the jurors. So those are really important. Sequestering a jury. This is what happens. Again, these are typically in really the serious long-term cases. Sequestering a jury basically means pulling them away from the rest of the world and making them, basically taking them away from all outside contact during the trial for whatever period of time so that they cannot have any outside influence. They can't watch TV. They can't read, the newspaper. They can't be on their phones. No outside influences at all. They can't be with their families. They will actually put them up in a hotel. They can have supervised phone contacts with their families, but they have to be supervised by a bailiff at all times. Obviously, really serious. It's a big deal, so a lot of times judges don't like to do this. But again, back to O.J. Simpson. Can you imagine? I think his case was probably the first one that was on court TV. The media coverage was just out of control. So in order to protect the jurors from getting all the random news media coverage and learning more about the case than that heard in court, they sequestered them or pulled them away from the community until the case was over. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Again, the jury system, I mentioned it earlier, think about it. How many people out there would you trust with your life, with making decisions on your behalf? How many people do you think are smart enough to figure out the justice system? So it's kind of tricky. Who are people who have the time and money to sit on a jury? Old retired people, right? Do you have time to go sit on a jury? Probably not, because you're in school, you're working, you're trying to survive right now and better yourself. But so it's challenging. A lot of people think that average jurors can't cope with the facts or understand the instructions given to them by the judge. So we do have, maybe some questions about how well the jury is able to even handle what's going on in the system. So what I wanted to talk about was my experience in the whole jury system. So I was in grad school. So I was at Fresno State. I was in the master's program. I was not a probation officer yet, and I got the jury notice, and I went down to the courthouse, and I got called into the jury box, and they were interviewing me. And my dad was a police officer. I had already graduated from Fresno State with my criminology degree with a law enforcement background. And I was in grad school in the master's program for criminology. I had applied for several jobs as a probation officer, and I was just waiting for that process. I had was very pro law enforcement, and I was on a criminal case, and they picked me, which kind of surprised me. And basically, no one was removed from all the first 12 of us that were in the box got chosen, which was kind of surprising to me because I figured to myself, like, I wouldn't have picked me if I were a defense attorney, because I would have thought that I might have been biased toward the law enforcement officers. But okay, we heard the case. It was a DUI case. We went back, deliberated for maybe a half hour. All of us voted immediately to convict. We came back and convicted the offender of DUI. And after the case, the judge told us that we had the opportunity to ask the lawyers questions if we wanted to. So I asked the defense attorney why he allowed me to stay on the jury, because I thought it was kind of a bad idea. I didn't think I was a good candidate for that jury. And he said to me, it was a loser case. It didn't matter who was on my jury. And I can tell you that was one day, that was a day that I really lost a lot of faith in the legal system, because I saw that he totally did not care. So anyways, there's my negative Nancy story for the day. But this is a summary, more summary, and we're done.